we are turning our attention back to the George Gibney story. George Gibney, of course, the former Irish swimming coach who was accused of 27 counts of indecent assault and unlawful carnal knowledge before escaping conviction in the 90s following a Supreme Court ruling in 1993. He is currently believed to be living in Florida, and there has been a new development in this situation. Investigative journalist Irvin Muchnick has been digging into this case in great detail over the past few years, and delighted to welcome back Irvin to the show. Irvin, you're very welcome.
Yes, thanks for having me again. Good to be here.
So basically, we can, if you want to read any of Irvin's work, by the way, you can go on to concussioninc.net. And your latest piece there, Irvin, talks about the fact that the Department of Justice in the United States are now on this case.
Yes, I mean, we kind of have it surrounded now. We have everything except the shoe dropping. We know that there's a federal grand jury in New York, and in the American justice system, grand juries work with prosecutors to figure out whether persons and entities should be indicted for crimes. It's a kind of preliminary phase of a case. But the fact that there's a grand jury investigating USA Swimming for financial impropriety and insurance fraud and cover-ups of sexual abuse cases in the United States is related to the Gibney matter. And the Gibney matter, as I've been saying for years, is a global issue, not just the story of individual coaches in Ireland who needed to be thrown under the bus and in some cases thrown into prison. So this grand jury has been operating through all of 2019. It's been reported by the Wall Street Journal and other prominent American newspapers. But what hasn't been reported is the related George Gibney aspect of the investigation, which I know has been happening for at least the last year. And I've now confirmed the office at the Department of Justice headquarters in Washington, D.C. that is working on the Gibney matter. It's called MLARS, which stands for Money Laundering and Asset Recovery Section. The person working on it, who I know you don't want me to name, is a longtime corruption prosecutor who joined the federal government in December of 2018. And her title is Human Trafficking Finance Specialist. So it's possible that this George Gibney investigation is related to USA Swimming financial improprieties that are also being probed by the federal government. It's possible that it's just an add-on to the federal grand jury investigation, but I can say with certainty that it's happening. Now, what hasn't happened is an indictment of George Gibney or an extradition order. These things have been happening with other foreign national Olympic coaches who've been living in the United States. A Mexican gymnastics coach in the Chicago area is now in the process of being deported. But it has a wrinkle with George Gibney because he didn't become a citizen. He was denied citizenship in 2010. The reason apparently being, from the records that I've been able to acquire under a Freedom of Information Act settlement with the Department of Homeland Security, the reason apparently being that Gibney lied on his citizenship application about whether he had ever been charged with a crime. And that disqualified him from getting a successful citizenship application, but in a bureaucratic, odd situation or wrinkle, the ICE office in the United States, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ruled that he could not be removed from the country because he had not been convicted of a crime.
Okay. Right. Okay.
So there's a whole bunch of things we can discuss surrounding all that.
So the Mexican gymnastics coach that is being investigated, or that those proceedings are currently underway in the United States at the moment, the difference there between him and George Gibney is that he was an actual citizen of the United States. He was successful in his application, whereas it's just a little bit more tricky for them to try and track down George Gibney or to press charges on George Gibney because he's not a United States citizen. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, well, tracking him down is not an issue. I think we all know where he is in Altamont Springs, Florida, near Orlando. There's this perverse ruling by ICE that it would have been better if George Gibney had gotten citizenship, and then we had found that he was lying, than the fact that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services caught the fact that he was lying when he applied and said he couldn't become a citizen. Now, a very distinguished federal judge in 2016, Judge Charles Breyer, said this completely baffled him because he knew of cases where American citizens had their passports taken away when they made false representations to the government. So he doesn't quite get it. But nonetheless, that's where we are. And of course, as you know, as I was reporting last year, the federal agents who have been investigating Gibney sort of decided last year, rather than try to untangle all the bureaucratic verbal gymnastics around lying on a citizenship application and failing, as opposed to lying on a citizenship application and succeeding, they decided to focus on actual nefarious activities that Gibney might have been involved in since he's become a resident alien in the mid 1990s, and that was his work in Peru with a children's medical mission sponsored by a Denver, Colorado area Catholic parish.
You might just explain once again that link with Peru there for anybody who missed I think it was in your ebook last year, if anybody wanted to check that out.
Right. So an employer in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, a suburb of Denver, busted Gibney the day after she hired him in 2000. His resume bragged about a bunch of things that he did, his work with at-risk kids in a college program and other things. But one line item said that he was chairman of the International Peru Eye Clinic Foundation through his Catholic church in the Denver area. And she found out about his Irish past and informed on him to the local police, and they investigated. And as we've seen repeatedly through the George Gibney story, they didn't find a crime that they could hang on him. But there is a pretty thorough report by the police about everything they looked into. Thorough, that is, except for one aspect. They didn't track down the church that he was affiliated with and all the details on this Peruvian children's medical mission. Now, what my ebook found was that during the same period, a sect in the Peruvian Catholic Church called Sodalicium Christianae Vitae, which is very controversial and has recently acknowledged that its founder and other leaders engaged in sexual abuse, kidnapping, and other crimes. They were looking to export their assets out of Peru because of many lawsuits that were coming down the line. And they expanded their operations into the United States and other countries. And their foothold in the United States is the Archdiocese of Denver. Now, again, I haven't completely confirmed every detail of this, only that it's an odd connection that I understand federal agents have been exploring, and I don't know what the final upshot of that is, but that's the Peru connection.
Yeah, well, that is one of the possible things that federal employees could possibly be investigating at the moment, because when you mentioned at the start that the Department of Justice is perhaps linking George Gibney into a separate USA Swimming investigation, it's hard to actually pinpoint what the exact thing is that they might investigate. So what you have is a potential list of theories, I presume, Irvin. I don't think, I don't assume you've got the information yet to the path that they will go down to try and investigate Gibney specifically.
Yes, don't have the specifics, but we have a little bit of an algorithm now,
sure,
knowing that the Washington, D.C. Justice Department office is being coordinated by a human trafficking finance specialist, and that the office involves money laundering and asset recovery. So possibly there is a nexus, as there is in the United States, between financial impropriety and sexual abuse. I know that the federal grand jury that's been reported by the major newspapers in the U.S. is looking into things like the offshore reinsurance operation of USA Swimming in the Caribbean island of Barbados. It's very technical, involved, money-changing stuff. I can't say with great confidence that that's exactly related to George Gibney, or if it's just a sort of add-on to what the grand jury is doing in New York. But we know that Washington and the Southern District of New York are talking to each other about these things, and that this seems to be the mechanism by which something would happen with George Gibney.
How quickly do we expect developments in this, Irvin, in the United States of America? Do these sort of things take months, years before we actually see what direction officials might be going down?
Yeah, well, as I was saying all of last year, and now I feel like I have the whole thing surrounded. It's kind of like predictions are not that valuable. How many days, how many weeks, how many months, and it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where we don't know how aggressively the Irish government is asking the United States to extradite Gibney. We don't know how eager the U.S. is to deport Gibney if they don't know that Ireland is actually going to take him and put him on trial for these allegations, old and new, against him. So I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I can only report what I know and keep reporting it and hoping that people, more formidable media players than myself in the United States and the Irish media in public will continue to bring pressure to bear on governments both there and here to make this finally happen.
As a final point then, Irvin, you've already mentioned that we're fairly certain of where George Gibney is currently based. Is he just operating as a normal citizen? Does he have a job in this part of Orlando? And when was the last time, for example, he's been cited or a photograph or some sort of footage has been published in the media, for example?
Well, I've talked on email as recently as yesterday with Evan Daly, who's the Irish-American gentleman who really deserves all the credit for bringing, Gibney to any level of consciousness in the United States. Because in 2010, he's the one who told the federal government about Gibney's past, and I think panicked Gibney into applying for citizenship. And the government was alert to the lies that he then told on his application. So Evan Daly has been a Gibney tracker for a number of years, and he tells me that Gibney is still in Central Florida. For all we know, he's hiding in plain sight. He's not involved in the swimming industry anymore and hasn't been for a number of years, but he's carrying on like your next door neighbor. And the last time there was like a big eruption of local awareness of Gibney was around 2010 when he left the house he previously had in Orlando and moved to Altamont Springs. And to the best of my knowledge, that's where things stand. So Gibney is there. He's a free man until he's not a free man. And he's unknown to the public in the United States until he's better known. And of course, I push that ball up the hill just about as much as I can.
Irvin, thanks a million for taking the call. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Owen.